Hi there and welcome to the build. This is going to be episode 1 on my 2014 Camaro SS Duramax swap. The car was a salvage car that I bought without a drivetrain. It's originally a TR6060 standard car with of course a 6.2 liter gas. When I originally put the car together, I put it together with a 2001 Duramax LB7 engine and a 4L80 transmission. I got to drive it like that for a few months and things went well. It was kind of a good test run to see what I liked about the car, what I didn't like. There's a few things that I wanted to change on it after driving it for a bit. One of the main things I wanted to change was, in order to fit the LB7 under the hood, I actually put subframe spacers in it, 3-inch subframe spacers to move the subframe down just to gain the clearance under the hood to fit that big motor in there. So moving forward with the car, one thing I want to get rid of is the subframe spacers. They don't allow for the car to sit at a proper ride height, and you have to space the front suspension, or in this case I have airbags, so it sits too high in the front and it doesn't look good in my opinion. It doesn't look right, and you don't have any ground clearance. So I mean, if you're cruising down the highway all day, it's fine, but if you want to go on any back roads or anything, I bottomed out quite a few times the old way. So moving forward with the car, one of the main goals is to have the car look and feel and function like a factory car. So if you were to order this car from GM brand new, you could have ticked off that 6.6 Duramax engine box and ordered the car and got it like that. So in order to do that, number one main goal is going to be to get the subframe back in the stock location, get it sitting low. I eventually want to have the car all 4 corners on airbags and have the car slammed right down to the ground. I think that looks awesome on these cars. So that with the Duramax engine would be just a really cool car to be driving on the highway. Number 2, we're going to upgrade from the 4L80 transmission to a 6L90 transmission. 6L90s came behind the Duramaxes in the vans, and a 6L90 was also behind the ZL1 Camaros with the supercharged engine. So I know the 6L90 will fit in the car, and it'll work behind the Duramax. So that's our next goal that we're going to hit. And then also while we're at it, we're going to upgrade to an LML engine. LMLs were made from 2012 to 2016. We're going to go with a 15-16 year model engine. For the computer was actually just a little bit different on those years, and I'll explain that in a later vehicle. It has to do with the communications between the computers as to why we want that newer motor, but that'll be later on in another video. So today's video is going to cover the subframe modifications, what I did to the subframe in order to fit everything under the hood of the car and still have the subframe in the factory location. So we'll kind of do a step-by-step on that. And yeah, so probably enough talking for now, so stick around. Subscribe if you want to get updates, because I'm going to start throwing out videos every few weeks here, every couple of weeks, whenever I got time to make them. And yeah, let's get to work.
So first thing we got to do is cut this cross member out, and we're eventually going to relocate it here a little bit further back. So we're just going to make a couple of cuts down and across like this, 1 inch on each side and on the top, and then we'll be able to take that top plate and reinstall it, and that's going to get our rack and pinion down 1 inch to gain our clearance that we need. Alright, with our pieces cut, you can see you can just lift the top plate off like that, and the tubes with the threads will just hang behind. The threads actually do go all the way to the bottom, so what we're going to be able to do is take a Sawzall and just slice these off flush with the cut that we've made onto the side of the subframe, and then there'll still be threads in there that we can still use to mount the rack and pinion, just with shorter bolts. With those tubes trimmed down, we can take that top plate, we would trim the sides off of it so it's just a flat piece now, and grab the rack and pinion just for another mock-up and see how it fits. Run into a little bit of interference here where the input shaft is, but that's no problem. All we're going to have to do is just notch out this corner here that's circled, and then make a couple of small plates and close them back in. Once we do that, then we can weld the whole thing up, and that'll be it for that part of the subframe. With the rack and pinion portion of the subframe modifications done, we can now move on to the cross members. This rear cross member we're going to get rid of completely. We need that space for the oil pan. The front cross member we removed earlier, we are going to locate it in between these two motor mount pads. We're going to take each side of it and contour it to match the contours of the motor mount pads. Then I bolted the subframe back up into the car, mocked it up into place, got it straight, and got it level and square with the rest of the cross members. Then I was able to tack it into place so it wouldn't move, and then bring it back out onto the ground and fully weld it. You're going to want to make sure you take time to cut those contours so they fit as close as possible. It's going to save you a bunch of time welding, and you won't have to use any filler metal later on. So with it fully welded up, it looks good, it's straight, turned out really nice. I can now hit it with the grinder, get the weld smoothed down, then we can throw some primer at it, a little bit of black paint, and when it's all said and done, you won't even know that we touched this thing. Okay, with the paint dry, we can see our finished product. One thing you should do before you paint it is make sure you clean up all the cut edges on the cross member we removed completely, just to make it look like a finished product and not something, that was modified. Kind of stick with that factory theme that we're going for here. You can see with the rack lowered, it doesn't hang down any lower than any other part of the subframe. So which is good. We're not going to have anything hanging down, bumping the ground. We'll keep our ground clearance. Same thing from the back here. So electric motor on the rack is still up high enough as to not cause any troubles, and it's still going to be protected from any road debris or rocks or anything like that. So with the subframe out of the car, before I mount it back into the car, I wanted to take the opportunity to mock it up against the engine. That way I could get any of my measurements for making the custom sheet metal oil pan to fit into the car with this subframe modifications. It's just a lot easier to do it now with the subframe out of the car. So I did that, and then basically it was just time to bolt the subframe back into the car, and that's the final time, and it doesn't have to come out for anything else. Okay, with the rack and everything bolted back in the car, you can see we got all the suspension components hooked back up, and the rack is sitting where it needs to sit. And you can still see the clearance is good, the ground clearance is good. One of the things we have to pay attention to is we might run into bump steer with lowering the rack 1 inch down. We've changed the suspension geometry. So a solution to that, if it is a problem, will be to add a 1 inch spacer at the tie rod here, maybe change to a different link end, and lower that down 1 inch. That way that'll get us our proper geometry and keep that angle that it should be at as the suspension moves up and down. Fast forwarding a little bit here can kind of give you a sneak peek with everything installed and the clearances between the rack and pinion and the oil pan. It's pretty close. There's probably about a 1/4 inch between the electric motor itself and the oil pan. So you can see without doing that 1 inch notch that it just wouldn't fit. Or we'd be sticking way too high up out of the hood, and then the turbo wouldn't clear the cowls. So it all kind of adds up a little bit here and there. Something you're going to want to do before the engine is installed, but after you get the subframe back installed into the car, is lengthen the steering shaft. I lengthened mine 1 inch. You can see here I actually just cut it and sleeved it with a piece of pipe that had the inner diameter the same as the outer diameter of that steering shaft. Then I actually just ended up cutting a bolt that was 1 inch long and putting it inside of that sleeve, and then kind of centering the sleeve on each half and then welding it up. That way it keeps itself straight because it's a tight fit onto the shaft, and you know, just gets you that extra length so it's not overextended or anything like that. Definitely want to do that while the engine's still out. I didn't take any footage of that, so I don't have any video of it, but you can see here how it was done, and you can see how well it just barely fits in there with the engine. One last thing I did in preparations of getting the engine installed is I dynamatted the firewall and the transmission tunnel, as you can see here. I also took a little bit of time to detail the engine bay and repaint it with some color match rattle can paint, which actually turned out really nice and just kind of brightens everything up under the hood before you get the engine back in place. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. In the next video, we're going to go over mounting the engine in. I'll go over the custom oil pan a little bit, kind of show you how that's done, and the engine mounts and the transmission mount, and we'll get the engine and the transmission all installed. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.